Hello. Today we revisit an old Ask Reddit of what's your true, unexplained story of being in a place that shouldn't exist for a part 2. Don't forget to subscribe as at least 650 of you return to my videos. Minus will subscribe so you don't have to type my name in the search bar constantly. Also make sure to comment any scary occurrences down below. With that, sit back and enjoy. My grandparents had a big farm when I was growing up, and all of the grandkids would help work it over the summer when we were out of school. Anytime we saw a rabbit, we were supposed to get it with the hoe or grab the shotgun. I was around 12 or so when I saw a little rabbit in the beans, and I didn't want my grandfather to see it, so I tried to chase it off. Followed it into the brush on the land, and for whatever reason I just kept following it because usually I'd lose sight of them pretty quickly once they hit the brush. Kept following it until I found what was clearly an old barn ruin. These are pretty normal to happen upon where I'm from, and they're fun to look around inside, so I went in. It was weirdly kept up really well with antique tools in great shape and fresh hay. I worried I had crossed into our neighbor's property, so I hightailed it out of there. I asked my grandfather about it, and he said our land went way far past what I had described, and I couldn't have left our land in the short amount of time I was gone, so he followed me out there and we couldn't find it. I checked every summer I worked there and never found it again. Not creepy, but it always drove me crazy where that stupid barn went. 1. There is a town right near me in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Lincoln Way in Clairton, PA, where a whole street full of families disappeared overnight back in the 70s. Everything, bills, food, clothes, etc. was left behind, no trace of them to this day. You can go on Google Maps and look it up. The houses are abandoned and almost closed off from the rest of the town. 2. There was another instance that I'll never forget. I read it here on a creepiest Google Map places. A man in Canada decided to drive until the highway stopped, sometime in the past couple years. I believe he started in Winnipeg and kept going northwest until he ran out of road. About 1-2 hours before he got to that point, he saw a lot of cars parked off the side of the road. Keep in mind that there wasn't a single gas station or store nearby, and hasn't seen a house for quite some time. There was a lot of about 30-35 cars, old cars, wanna say from the 50s or 60s, and in the distance he saw a cavern entrance that was faintly illuminated by light. He noticed the tail end of a group of people dressed in all black walking in. No signs were around advertising it, and he said he couldn't find anything about it on Google Maps. He posted this a year ago, and that trip was even further back from that. I reached out and tried to get any markers or nearby areas I could do my own research by, but he said he could not remember specifics. Still makes me wonder to this day what was going on there. When I was about 12, my mom and I were traveling cross-country to move. We were staying the night in Missouri, at a typical roadside hotel next to an Applebee's, so we went in for dinner. It was packed, despite us being one of only a couple guests at the hotel, so we sat up at the bar. We noticed something weird. After a few seconds, every single person had a glass of milk in front of them. Even the dudes around the bar. Nothing else, just a tall glass of milk. Someone opened the fridge under the center bar, and we saw just gallons of milk. The bartender took our dinner orders and brought each of us a glass of milk without us asking for anything to drink. It was so ducking weird. My mom told me not to drink it. On our way back to our room, my mom stopped at the front desk and asked the woman working there, half jokingly and half concerned, why everyone drinks so much milk in this town. The woman said she had no idea what she was talking about, and we just moved on. When we were putting our leftovers in the mini fridge up in our room, there were like 10 mini cartons of milk. No brand, just the word milk in black lettering. It was a weird place, and I've never been able to figure it out. Edit. This happened 17 years ago, but it was a pretty formative experience during a really weird road trip. I recently posted on this account about a different strange hotel experience we had in Texas. So, the Applebee's and hotel were both off I-70. I always remembered it being Missouri, but a family member of mine seems to think it was another state, maybe Kansas. I had a glass of water along with my milk, and the water in the hotel worked just fine. When my mom said something like, "Oh, no thanks, water is fine," when the bartender set down the glasses of milk in front of us, I remember he sort of chuckled and shook his head like she was joking. Hey, I can answer this. I don't think I've posted about it here. So, growing up, my parents were divorced. My dad lived on a decent chunk of land, with the house in the front. The backyard was a field surrounded by trees, woods on two sides, and an open pasture on the other. So, in the woods behind the house there was this little river that my brother and I would play in, and we had a pretty good path there. We even dug steps into the side of the hill. So, we mainly stayed there, but sometimes would go down river by where it opened up into the field next door. Well, one day we decide to go deeper into the woods instead of down the river. So we take our little day packs and head off. The brush was real thick, and was really slow going. So eventually my brothers is like, "Duck this, I'm out," just because it was too thick and starting to turn into a swamp. Well, I keep going. Probably about a mile away from the river, I find this concrete pillar and surrounded by trees and shit. So, I do what any young kid would do and climbed up it. It was probably 8-ish feet tall, so it wasn't too hard. Well, on two of this pillar, there was a hole with metal rungs going down. I take out my flashlight and jump on in, 'cause why not? I get to the bottom, which felt like maybe 6 or 7 feet below ground. I could fully stand up, but didn't have much headroom, and it was a concrete rooms. I looked around and it looked like it was well used. A dirty sleeping bag, empty canned foods, candles, some yard ornaments that were stolen from us a few years prior, some books and a CD player. Freaked me the duck out, and I noped out real quick. It felt like I was being watched the whole way back to the river. Didn't tell anyone 'cause I was a kid, and never went back. We eventually stopped playing by the river because it started stinking like sewage really bad. We're pretty sure the neighbor was dumping shit near the river and it was seeping into the ground and water. Similar experience, found an old storm sewer in the middle of the woods that was built for a subdivision that never came to be. So a lot of vagrants lived down there. A few of us kids would go play in there, found some porn magazines. A wonder none of us got killed. Here was an old graveyard behind an old converted Masonic temple I used to like to visit in college, mostly just for the history. Lots of famous names from the 1700s pop up in this sucker, like the brothers and sisters and cousins of famous people more than the people themselves. But anyways, it's some pretty cool old stuff. Well, there's one big mausoleum in there and one old crematorium. A couple times when I would go to visit, I'd go in the mausoleum and find a bunch of empty beer cans. Figure it's kids drinking at night trying for the spooky angle. But the weird thing about the crematorium was that it still had power and phone lines running to it, but obviously had been shut down for decades. The door was busted so bad you could basically step through it if you didn't want to open it. The place was pretty decrepit. Well, I went visiting one night. I went to the crematorium, and found a winter jacket hung up right near the door. Then I looked down and saw a bedroll the next floor under. That spooked me enough I didn't want to go down the ladder and just got the hell out of there. I'm sure it was just some homeless dude holing up in there. But it was freaky. When my brother and I were 10 and 12 respectively, our family went on a hike through the cemetery and into the woods not far from our house. My brothers and I would explore these woods every day. Even camped in them before. We knew it like the back of our hands. Anyway, as the family hits our usual spot by the creek halfway through Brother 1 and I said we'd be back in a few, we wanted to wander off further up creek. So we did. We came across a very large hill we had never seen before. It was littered with what looked like someone's worldly possessions. As if they turned a house upside down, shook out the contents, took the house and left. There were tons of painted X's on the trees showing someone intended to cut them down at some point. We poked around for a few when we thought we heard our mom hollering at us. So we turned tail and walked maybe 20 feet back down the hill to where our parents were. The entire encounter was maybe 45 minutes long. On our end. As soon as our mom saw us, we got the beating of a lifetime. We had actually been gone almost 4 hours. She never saw us walk up any hill and remembered seeing us meandering down the straight path by the creek, not turning up a hill that was 20 feet away. She and her husband and our other brother combed the woods for over 4 hours screaming our names and couldn't find hide nor tail of us. We pleaded our case and even tried showing her the hill. Surely she was messing with us. So we stomped up to the turnoff for the hill and it was gone. Nowhere to be seen. For years we explored the woods determined to find that ducking hill. We covered miles and miles of off-path woods. As we got older we mapped it out. To this day that hill does not exist. We never found it again. Never found the weird furniture, toys, clothes, and other household items that were scattered across the hill. And never met anyone in the area that had a clue about the hill. We probably just wandered way further than we meant to, but I always found it weird that we never found the hill again. A group of friends and I decided to take a small Saturday afternoon road trip into the backcountry of South Carolina. We figured we'd just drive around, head southwest, and see if we could find some antique shops, cemeteries, abandoned buildings and the like. We pile into my car and start driving. It's about an hour of nothing, just some light conversation in southern pine forests. We pass a few horse farms, some quaint old mill towns, and a few gas stations, but nothing interesting yet. 2 p.m. rolls around and we decide we wanted to get something to eat. As a rule, we always like to try local diners and restaurants, so we kept driving until we saw a faded road sign for a town. It was about 5 miles down the road and we figured that's good enough. As we're driving through the town, we notice there's no one out. No cars on the roads, no people on the streets, and no real houses. The streets are lined with abandoned and boarded up warehouses, shops with broken windows, and a few broken down cars from the 90s. The further we go, the worse it gets. We finally get to a diner that's right off their main street. It looks like there's about 10 people eating inside and there's a few cars in the parking lot. Seems like they're open. Here's where it starts to get weird. We open the door and step in. As soon as we clear the threshold, everyone stares at us. It's like in movies where the record scratches on the jukebox and everyone looks, except far more uncomfortable. In the middle of the diner is a large table with 6 people around it, who all turn back to their food and start whips talking. The waitress nervously shuffles up to us and quietly asks how many. My friend Chris takes the lead and says, 4, in just a normal speaking voice. Everyone looks at us again and the waitress, who looks barely older than 16, recoils, but takes us to our table. She sat us in a basic 4 top near the large table in the middle. She takes our drink orders and leaves. Once she goes, we all whisper about how weird that was. While we're talking, the line cook is just staring at us with this violent look in his eyes. We all figure out what we want and wait. We sit in awkward silence for about 10 minutes before the waitress comes back. She takes our orders and disappears into the back of the diner, leaving us alone in the dining room with the people at the other table. It gives us some time to look them over. They're a basic Southern family. Chubby, haggard-looking wife. Husband with sun-leathered skin and oil stains on his coveralls. 3 children, all girls, all in nice Sunday dresses. And then her. The other woman was dressed like the younger girls, but looked very much in her 40s. She wore a red, paisley-patterned dress, with frilled lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was long and stringy and covered the bulk of her round face. To the left of her was a doll, seated in a high chair for babies. The woman would sometimes lean in towards the doll and whisper something, then giggle. Soon the waitress dropped food off at their table, but set a meal down for the doll too. She commented on how pretty the woman's daughter was and left. About 10 minutes later she came back with our food, silently left it, gave us the side eye, and walked away. The waitress came back to refill the other table's water, where she asked everyone how the food was, but asked the doll too. When she asked the doll, she spoke in a baby voice. The woman then picked up the doll, held it in front of her face, and spoke in a little girl's voice. She was being the doll. My other friend looked at me with the most terrified, wide-eyed expression. She worked with disturbed children as a therapist in a court-mandated facility. We shoveled our mediocre food down and my friend Chris just dumped $40 on the table and we left. As we were leaving the town, Chris was looking for any sort of town name. I was checking to make sure we weren't being followed. This happened about 6 years ago and we still can't find that town. No one remembers the name, or the road it was off of, but we remember being there and what the diner looked like. With that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching all the way until the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment any surprising occurrences. If you want to continue to watch my content, click the video on screen now. Until next time.